So, first natural life series centered on matriarchies, female-led production team, and then y'all got Angela Bassett doing narration. Queens is 4 years in the making. Talk to me about what inspired this and you know, what you guys wanted to, you know, achieve with this series.
So this all started with a conversation with another female executive at National Geographic called Janet Han-Vissering. I pitched just one show, which was actually became the opening show about lions v hyenas in Ngorongoro Crater. And she said, this should be a whole series. And I went, nah, it's been done. And we looked through the back catalogue of all the great landmark series, and female power in the natural world had never been looked at. Surprise, surprise. So we thought, obviously, the time was right, and also an amazing opportunity to staff it with a female-led team and hopefully grow and raise up new, diverse and female talent, which is what we've done.
Absolutely. And what was your initial thought when you learned about what Vanessa was wanting to do?
Oh, well, I was actually on maternity leave when Vanessa called me and said, I have this series. And I said, I've got a baby. I haven't slept. I can barely string a sentence together. This is too big a project. I can't do it. And she actually said, this is exactly why you're going to do it. Mm-hmm. And so then we started and we thought, right, we need to make a brilliant female team. And that became our first big challenge because we looked around and went, where are we going to find the women to do this? Mm. Because the number of female cinematographers at this kind of level can be counted on one hand. The industry is set up for men. It always has been. So we literally had to rip up the rule book and find a completely different way to make a series like this. This is revolutionary to make this series. And it wasn't always easy, but it was a hugely satisfying thing to do, both in the office, on location, in post-production. Just phenomenal women and incredible men that supported us, because there actually aren't enough women to make a series like this. But hopefully we are the first in a wheel of change, and we leave a legacy.
There's not enough women. And so we looked around and we managed to, there wasn't short of supplies of beautiful, incredible, talented women out there for us to choose. And we managed to work with 5 stellar, absolutely extraordinary talents, Faith being one. And that was, I think, the best thing I've ever done in my life, to actually work and see an industry that I went into having to wear a badge that said cameraman, because there wasn't one that said camera woman, to then be able to go, look at this real legacy we've left behind. And Faith is, working with Faith and Erin and Tanya and the rest of the crew has been, one of the best things ever.
I was going to say, give it up for Faith, first Black Kenyan woman, to produce and direct on a major landmark series. No, seriously, give that up. Before you talk about, how you became a part of the project, talk to me about the importance of what it means to be breaking down barriers for people who are Black and brown to be entering this space in filmmaking.
It means everything. When we talk about natural history, wildlife series or films, most of them, I don't know, I don't have the statistics, but most of them are filmed in Africa. But the irony up until a few years ago is a lot of the people who make these series aren't Africans. It's kind of like it blows your mind a little bit, like why is that? But it's because of how the industry was set up in England, and, people would go on adventures, film stuff, then go back and cut it. So when something's made that way, it excludes the people who are living with the animals, the actual stakeholders. So to include Black and brown voices in this, it's just, it has to happen. The natural world needs it to happen.
Absolutely. And you learned from some incredible OGs who've been in the game for a long time. What was that experience like for you?
Oh my gosh, unbelievable. When people pitch something like this will happen, because I'm Kenyan, and I was a director in drama and like documentaries, and completely different from this. And the first time I heard this idea, I was very cynical. I was like, yeah, right. We get lots of scams in Africa, and it sounded like a scam. But then, because, we're talking about the best of the best in this genre. Mm-hmm. And for someone to say, oh yeah, you'll get to work with them, I was like, yeah, right. But then it actually happens. I was in the field with Sophie for months and months on end, and I was telling some people earlier on, I was like that emoji with the heart eyes because she's like, she knows I was fangirling the first few shoots we had together.
It's okay, it's turned around now.
Yeah, but I mean, just unbelievable access and privilege, and it wouldn't have worked out the way it did if Janet from NatGeo, Vanessa and Chloe hadn't been so intentional about being like, this is how it's gonna go down.
Absolutely. Morgan, let's get into this music. It's like a lot of soul, punk, rock, original songs, stuff that you've heard on the radio also. How much of this was directorial notes versus the freedom that you were given?
Well, one of the first questions that I posed to Chloe when we first got to know each other, because this is a problem on many projects I've had prior to this beautiful project, is how different do you actually want to go? And I feel like a lot of times people think that they want to take things in a really creative direction, and creative, define that how you will, just not a traditional direction, and inevitably end up halfway through the project saying, oh, we're scared, we don't want to go there. I felt like it was like a kismet moment with Chloe where it was like, what, are you really willing to be creative with me? Can you let me do what I do? And she said yes, and that never wavered or faltered. So it was a privilege to work on a project like this, where you're not told to tone it down. But to the music supervision as well. It's with Sarah Bridge. The score is, I think, occupying a space where it interacts really closely with the placement songs as well. So there's lots of incredible pop music, and define your genre, but it's an interaction between the score and the placements, the needle drops. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of genres, I didn't know if I was watching a documentary or a drama or a reality TV series, because I was like, what is happening next? Like, y'all saw this episode, you gotta watch the entire series. It is crazy amazing. Chloe, tell us about your writing process, and how did this differ from what you've done before?
Well, a bit like Morgan, I'm often hired because people want something different, and invariably they never mean it, and then it gets eroded over time. And I have to say, this process, NatGeo, they never wavered. We were allowed to do different. And I wanted to make a show that was accessible, that would speak to maybe people that had felt natural history might not be for them before. I wanted them to see that these amazing animal characters that we had the privilege to get to know are so like us, and the female experience is universal. I look at little Zoe trying to make her way in the world, and I'm instantly back at school and trying to make my friends. And so we wanted it to be relatable. We wanted it to speak, fact and science is at the basis of everything we do, but we didn't want to deliver fact on a plate. This didn't want to feel like sort of dry, factual. I wanted this to be interwoven into the story. And then you have a voice like Angela, and she has so much of her own lived experience to bring to that. So as the writing process goes, each episode is quite different, and some of the lines write themselves, like "All hail the Queens." It was always going to be, and we don't call her Mother Nature for nothing, because we don't. These are phenomenal female powerful stories, and then they just evolve. And sometimes the characters inspire you to write. Other times you're trying to weave science in a way that feels entertaining and exciting. But we have always been unapologetically dramatic about these stories because they are.
Yeah.
So yes, it is a blend. It's not straight natural history. It's a blend of drama. It's been incredibly fun and creatively freeing to do.
Absolutely. And one thing that I love that you guys didn't dramatize so much was like the graphic scenes, whether it be the mating or the attacks that were happening, and even just you throwing in consent and how important that is, to the woman experience. Talk to me about the decision-making process in doing that, because that stood out to me as a viewer, where a lot of times you see these documentaries and it's like, oh, we got to see the bloodiest, the goriest, the most action-driven. But really, that subtle, telling of the story was just enough for me to understand. So talk to me about that a little bit.
It's great. It was a big risk for us to purposely turn away from the things that natural history usually does, which is the big height, the hunts, the fights, the flowing manes, the big teeth. They're all really sexy male behaviors. And for us to move Sophie's lens and go, no, just focus on the slightly drab-looking female over there that's smaller and not as exciting. And we knew that these behaviors existed, but we didn't know. It was a risk to see whether they would be dramatic and entertaining enough. And every day these animals proved to us that it was. We couldn't believe what we saw coming through from the field. We were laughing, we were crying. Consent, hugely so. It's fundamental to a lot of the societies that we followed. But these queens are not all kind and benevolent. Across the series, you will see some real characters and, you know, some pretty hardcore behavior as well. So, you know, the bonobos are kind and gentle, but that's not to be said across the board in the natural world. You know, there are all types of female leader.
For sure. And how did you guys decide what insects, animals that you guys wanted to tackle? Like, you have lions, you've got bears. What was the decision-making process behind that as well, in terms of saying, okay, these are the queendoms that we wanna look at? Bonobos, I mean, as you guys just saw, you know, crazy great episode, but like, you know, they were the most difficult from my research.
Absolutely.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, to choose to do a show on bonobos, a lot of, I've worked in the industry for 30 years and it's never been done before. And there's a really good reason. It's really freaking hard. And you've got to trek right to the heart of the Congo. That's not easy, number one. Then when you get there, it's thick, dense vegetation. You can barely see the bonobos. And, you know, this is about as physical as it gets. And it was filmed by Sophie and a team. And in fact, one of the principals, who Sophie helped train up, Tanya Escobar, was 5'2", 100 meters up in the rainforest, you know, with lightning and bees. And so some of these shows weren't obvious to choose, but we knew Bonobos was such an amazing story of a matriarch, you know, to have this female-driven society where the groups are actually formed by friends. So they all leave their families and then they form a new group. That's how it happens. So that in itself we knew was going to be a great episode. Then we went through, Chloe and I, and we kind of looked at how do we get variety, because we wanted different styles of leaders. We want everyone in this room to go, oh, that's me. And, you know, guys are going to be looking at some of these shows and seeing themselves too. And that's really important. So we have a nice balance. We've got lions and hyenas in the first show, bonobos. We've got a coastal show with bears and orcas. And boy, if you want to Chloe's point, if you want to see a leader that's really badass, gangster granny, orca, she's a piece of work. And what she'll do for her son defies. I mean, I've got one boy and I'll do a lot, but I won't kill for him so that he can mate. I mean,
Vanessa's like,
got to be some boundaries.
Too far. So yeah, but we've got soft stories, we've got emotional stories, and the queendoms themselves, we wanted to feel quite different. These worlds that you get immersed into and drawn into, and I think, you know, for Sophie that must have been exciting because each world had its own unique cinematic challenges as well.
Yeah, no, you want to make the most of it, whether that, I mean, the bonobos, you look at that incredible forest, and drone was so important because otherwise it can feel quite claustrophobic, but those beautiful aerials taking you out, and also the gimbal movement in amongst the trees.
Which had never been done before. No one's taken a gimbal into a rainforest before for good reason.
You're talking, like, not only have you got to walk, you know, 30K, and by the way, I didn't shoot bonobos, I shot other bits of it, but I classify myself as too tall for jungles because I keep on like getting mouthfuls of spiders. But it's the absolute brute force you have to use to keep up to them. And when you get to them, you've got 30 kilos of camera that you've then got to deploy and then use in a way. And it's so exquisitively and sensitively shot. I mean, the way we peer into their secret world, you really feel like we're part of it. And yeah, so tools and technique were a huge part of each and every episode. I mean, Evil Queens, I call it the Evil Queen glosser.
Yes.
Oh, one of I mean, the score on Tiny Jungle Queens is just...
That was a fun one to do. Yeah. Well, I got to fully dive into the electronic world, which I don't know that, you know, I've been a fan of obviously this genre for many moons, but I don't know that I've seen anybody commit as a team to saying, go for it. And we're going to go full electronic ARPs and synthesizers. And it was such a joy.
Yeah.
It really works.
Very alien, you know?
It's so great when Morgan was like, oh, she's going drum and bass on this one. Oh, wow. and it just naturally, organically happened. And yeah, no, I can tell you, having worked on many of these shows, this has never been done before. And I think what you brought to it is just so fresh. It's so unique.
It was such a privilege because I, having had some experiences even recently, having the people that have entrusted you with articulating a vision that's on screen and just saying, go forth. And we'll tailor afterwards, but we want you to throw the proverbial spaghetti at the wall. I felt like I was pulling myself back at times because it was a preconceived notion of perhaps what the genre would require, and that was my own, pre-bias, I suppose. But it was a privilege. Yeah.
Was there anything that you were listening to yourself while kind of going through and thinking of what sounds you wanted for the series?
I think just the conversations that I had with Chloe and Vanessa, and I think that what's beautiful about this particular genre is that the editors that work on this show they're absolutely brilliant with music. So there was kind of like the bones of what to follow, but that's just the nature, I think, of the genre, where you're hitting certain cuts with music and there's emotional intention at certain junctures. But I don't know, I just felt really free. And also my voice is something that I've used as an instrument for a long time. So, I mean, even in this episode, just, I would shut myself in my studio and kind of pull the curtains down as I would start to get episodes before I would start working on them. And I would just lay there I have a mattress that I put out, like this little campaign mattress, because I work in the studio a lot late. And so I would just kind of lay there and just watch and just go, just cry. and when they hold hands, I was like, oh my God, I know what to do. And, just immediately get up to the microphone and start singing into the microphone. And to be able to use my voice as a way of expressing myself for a series like this was a total privilege. It was awesome.
What would you guys say was, because I imagine that a lot of this was like a watch and wait game, what was the longest you had to wait for some action to like pop off?
We had a stunning moment on the elephant series, didn't we, Faith? What happened there? How many months did we wait for an elephant to give birth?
A little over 2 months. I think it was like 2.5 months.
And did it?
And then she did give birth, but just the day after we left. So
having a cast who don't read scripts can be a real issue at times.
I can write it as much as you want, but unfortunately they won't read it. So
yeah. And what would you say, was the most challenging part of all of this? I mean, we talked about the bonobos, but overall, just artistically, creatively, structurally, what was the most difficult part of crafting this?
I think it was the weight on our shoulders. There was a moment quite early on in production. A lot of natural history TV gets made in the same city in the UK, in Bristol. And so it's a very kind of closed community. We all know each other. And when word got out about Queens, there was very much a sense of, that series the girls are making, which obviously made us go. But in that moment, we realised the weight of the fact that not only did we have to make something good, we had to make something great because everyone was waiting for us to fail across the board. And so we've carried that weight for 4 years, and we cannot tell you what a privilege it is to see people's reactions to these films, because there's that moment you put out, you go, we think it's good. We think it's good, but we have done something different. It may not be for everyone. So I think we've all sort of heaved that collective sigh when we realise it is good and people are enjoying it. Thank goodness, because it was a risk, a huge risk.
No, absolutely. First and foremost, the first episode, you have to watch the entire series. But the first episode, in tears. You had me in tears, Chloe. Oh my gosh.
Sorry, is it okay to say great about that?
know.
No, I'm sorry.
It was like great laughs, cries, everything. I mean, you guys did an exceptional job. Seriously, congratulations. I mean, give them another round of applause for everything that they did. You guys got to watch the entire series. Is there any chatter about another installment at all?
Well, we'd like to, wouldn't we?
There's plenty more stories where these came from, and everyone's asking if you watch the other show, and there's cliffhangers throughout the entire. And people are like, what happened to Aisha? What's happened to Yeye? If you watch that show, so and joking apart, there's more matriarchal societies, and what's really exciting is scientists are kind of revising their thoughts. They're looking at classic patriarchal societies and going, maybe the females do have more power than we realize. We just haven't been looking in the right way. So there's lots of interesting stories that are still left to tell.
Okay, I'm into it. What queendoms would you like to explore?
Oh, wow.
There's more insects, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's plenty more
most
insects.
insects are matriarchal. Yeah. So there we go. And there's a lot of species of insect in the world, like billions.
I'd like to do the snow wolves.
snow wolves.
We chose, though, Ethiopian wolves because everybody knows wolves quite well. And the Ethiopian wolf, if you watch the Mountains episode, which is set in Ethiopia in the most extraordinarily beautiful kind of mountain kingdoms, everyone looks at them and goes, they're a bit foxy. It's like, no, they're wolves, they're pure wolf. And it was really lovely to introduce a whole, there's only 500 left of them in the world, you know, they're really rare. And so it was really lovely to champion, especially now, and you were talking about that earlier, Faith, about the climate crisis and what this show is doing, and a really, I think, very beautifully understated, not shoving it in people's faces, but there is a message throughout all of this to the legacy that hopefully the show leaves in terms of addressing the climate crisis, but also the legacy of someone like Faith or Erica Rugabandana, who was the first ever Tanzanian, African, possibly longlands camera woman who was trained up on this series. So there's... I curveballed there, lads. That's what I usually do.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are plenty more animals, but there's plenty more people to make the film, is what I wanted to say.
That's a good point. There's a lot of work still left to do. There's so many more women we'd like to give opportunities to, and underrepresented groups as well. And their voices need to be heard now more than ever in nature. And it's the people, I think, as Faith so beautifully put, that have... they're stakeholders in the world. They live with the wildlife. Their voices need to be heard more than any others.
Absolutely. And again, the seventh episode, cheers. I'm so happy that you did that. Congratulations on that, Faith. Like, you did the hell out of that, okay? This is all the time that we have, but please give these queens louder, y'all. Thank you guys so much. Congratulations. And please go watch Queens on Disney Plus and also Hulu.